My name is Olivia Bennett, and 14 days before my wedding, my fiancé's ex-girlfriend walked into my office, put a sonogram photo on my desk, and said, "The baby is his." I want you to sit with that for a second, because it took me a full minute to remember how to breathe. I was 29, an event planner in Austin, Texas, and for 11 months, I had been planning what I thought was going to be the happiest day of my life. Derek Coleman and I met at a friend's barbecue off South Congress 2 years earlier. And from the very first conversation, over brisket and cheap beer, I knew he was different. He proposed near the Congress Avenue Bridge over Lady Bird Lake, with the bats pouring into the sunset behind him, and it felt like something out of a movie. Derek came from old Austin money. His family owned 3 restaurants and a chunk of real estate near the Domain, and his mother, Patricia Coleman, ran that empire like a queen running a court. Derek's younger brother Ryan was the golden child, already engaged to a woman Patricia adored, a girl from the same country club circle. And there was Vanessa Pierce, the daughter of Patricia's best friend, who had known both brothers since college and had dated Derek himself for 2 years before it fizzled out, long before I ever came along. From the beginning, Patricia was polite to me. Polite, but never warm. She'd correct the way I pronounced wine labels at dinner. She'd mention, a little too often, how well Derek used to get along with Vanessa. I told myself it was harmless. Have you ever had that gut feeling about someone that you talked yourself out of just to keep the peace? That was me for almost 2 years. I remember one detail from our engagement party at the Coleman Lake House that I didn't think twice about at the time. Ryan and Vanessa had disappeared from the patio within minutes of each other and came back separately almost 20 minutes later. I filed it away as nothing. I wish I hadn't. The first crack came about 6 weeks before the wedding. Derek's phone started buzzing at strange hours, and he'd take it into the other room. When I asked, he said Vanessa kept calling about some restaurant lease her firm was handling for the family. I let it go. I had seating charts to finalize and a mother-in-law to please. Then, 3 weeks out, at the final walkthrough at our venue in the Hill Country, Patricia pulled me aside near the wine cellar and said something that still gives me chills. "Olivia, sweetheart, are you absolutely sure about this? Some things have a way of coming out at the worst possible time." I laughed it off. I had no idea she was warning me about a bomb whose fuse she had already lit. And then came the day I will never forget. I was at my office on 4th Street when my assistant told me a woman was here to see me. It was Vanessa. She slid a sonogram photo face up onto my keyboard and said, "I'm 4 months along, it's Derek's. It happened at his cousin's engagement party in April, while you two were already engaged." Right around 10:30, after the toast, we slipped out to the parking lot. I've kept it quiet because Patricia asked me to wait for the right moment. "I think you deserve to know before you marry him." While we were already engaged, 14 days from our wedding, my hands were shaking so hard I couldn't even pick up the photo. I called Derek in tears, screaming into the phone. He swore up and down, nothing happened, that he hadn't been alone with Vanessa in over a year. But here's the thing about betrayal. Even when someone tells you the truth, once the seed of doubt is planted, you start questioning every memory you have together. That night, I couldn't sleep, so I started small. I pulled up the videographer's highlight reel from his cousin's engagement party and scrubbed through the timestamps. At 10:30, the exact moment Vanessa said they'd slipped out to the parking lot together, Derek was on camera, front and center, giving a toast with his uncle's arm around his shoulder. It wasn't proof that nothing ever happened between them, but it was enough to make me look a whole lot closer. So I looked twice as hard. I took a photo of the sonogram Vanessa had left behind and ran it through a reverse image search. Have you ever felt your stomach drop watching a loading bar? Because that's exactly what happened next. The exact same image, patient information cropped out along the edge, showed up on a pregnancy forum post from 4 years earlier, uploaded by a username that had nothing to do with Vanessa at all. But that wasn't even the worst part. The next morning, Derek and I sat down with the shared phone account Coleman restaurants used for the whole family, including his mother, and there it was. 3 calls a week between Patricia's number and Vanessa's number, going back 4 months. 4 months, right around when this supposed affair happened. Coincidence? I didn't think so anymore. I confronted Patricia myself, no filter left in me at all. She looked me dead in the eye without blinking and said, "You have no idea what you're talking about, Olivia." And for a second, I actually doubted myself. So I set my phone on her kitchen counter and showed her the call log, then pulled up the forum post beside it. Her face changed completely. The polite mask just slid right off. "Fine," she said, stirring her tea like we were discussing centerpieces. "You want the truth? I never thought you were right for this family. Vanessa understands what it means to run a Coleman household. I only helped her find her courage to speak up." Vanessa had taken the sonogram from a stranger's 4-year-old forum post, and Patricia had coached her on the entire timeline, down to the exact week. My future mother-in-law had manufactured evidence to stop my wedding, all because she didn't think I was good enough for her son. She didn't need the lie to survive 9 months. She only needed it to survive 14 days. I sat with Derek that night and told him everything. He was devastated, disgusted with his own mother. Later that week, at Sunday dinner, I watched him choose me out loud for the first time since we'd gotten engaged, calling his mother's actions unforgivable, right to her face. But you know how these stories go. One twist is never really the end. If you thought Patricia's confession was the end of this story, it wasn't. 2 days later, Vanessa showed up at my apartment alone, mascara running down her face, and told me the fake sonogram wasn't the whole lie. She really was pregnant. Just not by Derek. The real father was Ryan. "My real scan showed I was farther along than the April story allowed," she said. "That's why Patricia told me to use someone else's ultrasound instead of my own." She handed me her phone right there, in the doorway, months of messages still sitting in the thread, hotel confirmations, late-night texts, one where Ryan told her flat out he wasn't leaving his fiancé. She had asked him to choose her, and he had refused. Terrified and out of options, she'd gone to Patricia, who saw an opportunity instead of a crisis. Patricia told her, and I quote, "Derek will forgive you eventually, he always does, but Ryan's fiancé never will. So, of the 2 brothers, better to burn the one already replaceable." Patricia promised to take care of Vanessa quietly if she pinned the pregnancy on Derek instead, stopping my wedding and protecting Ryan's engagement in the exact same breath. 2 birds, 1 devastating lie. Replaceable. That's the word Patricia used for her own son. I stood there in my own doorway, holding a truth that should never have had anything to do with me at all, and I actually started laughing. Not because it was funny, because it was so unbelievably twisted that laughing felt like the only sane response left in me. Have you ever had a moment where the anger just leaves your body and all that's left is pure exhaustion? That's exactly where I was. I didn't scream at Vanessa. I just quietly closed the door and called Derek. That same night, Derek called Ryan with the phone on speaker between us. Ryan denied it for less than 5 minutes before he broke and admitted everything. We postponed the wedding by 3 months, not to punish anyone, but because I needed to know I was marrying a man who could live without his mother's approval. At the rehearsal dinner we eventually did hold, Derek stood up in front of both families and, instead of the usual toast, looked straight at Patricia and said he loved her, but he would never again let her decide who deserved a seat at his table. You could hear forks freeze mid-air across the room. He stopped taking Patricia's calls entirely, and for the first time in his life, chose distance from the empire he was raised to inherit. Over time, he allowed limited contact again, mostly for holidays, but always strictly on his terms. Ryan's engagement collapsed the week the truth came out. A paternity test after the baby was born confirmed what Ryan had already admitted. He and Vanessa never became a couple. Patricia still calls me occasionally, always with some version of an apology that isn't really an apology at all. We eventually figured out what those strange late-night calls to Derek's phone had really been, questions about a restaurant lease that Patricia had deliberately routed through. Vanessa's law firm timed late enough that Derek would already look secretive by the time the sonogram showed up. Vanessa had the baby that fall, a little girl, and last I heard, she's raising her as a single mother, cut off from both the Colemans and her own family's country club circle, the very world she thought she was protecting all along. I saw her once, months later, in the baby aisle at a grocery store off Barton Springs Road. We didn't speak, there wasn't anything left to say. Derek and I did get married eventually, in a small ceremony at a vineyard outside Fredericksburg, string lights over long wooden tables, no wine cellar walkthroughs, and no seating chart drama. Just us, my mother from Waco, and the people who actually showed up for us when it mattered. Patricia was invited. She sat in the back row, and left before the cake was cut. But here's what still keeps me up some nights. At Thanksgiving last year, Patricia sat across the table from me, passing the mashed potatoes like nothing had ever happened between us. And I smiled and passed the gravy back. Because sometimes, the people who hurt you the most never pay for it in the way you imagined. They just get quieter about it. So let me ask you this. Would you still have married Derek, knowing his family would always be a part of your life? Should I have judged Derek separately from his mother, or was staying just easier than starting over? Tell me in the comments, because I still don't know if staying was strength, or if I underestimated what it really means to marry into a family like his.